Hi, everyone. Do you find yourself worrying excessively about work, school, your relationships, your health, the future? If so, you're not alone. Worry is a common human experience, yet, although all people tend to worry, what would you think if I told you that most of your worries were actually useless? The reality is, most worry is pointless. It doesn't help you solve problems. It doesn't make you more productive. It doesn't prevent bad things from happening. It doesn't make you a caring, conscientious person. Rather, worry is essentially the mental equivalent of spinning your wheels, thinking about a whole bunch of negative things that may never happen. So today's video is a compilation video, putting together a series of videos that I've done on beliefs about the usefulness of worry and the costs associated with worry. So what I'll be talking about is the 5 common worry beliefs, which include the belief that worry helps motivate me, worry helps me problem solve, worry helps prevent future negative events, worry helps protect me from future negative emotions, and that worry in and of itself represents a positive personality characteristic. Not only will we be discussing each of these beliefs, but I'll also explain ways to specifically challenge these thoughts and questions that you can ask to help chip away at these beliefs that may be perpetuating your worry. Additionally, I'll also be talking about some of the costs and the negative impacts that worry can have on your life. And once we've gone through all of the worry beliefs and the costs associated with excessive worry, I'll be explaining how to put all of this information together and how to use a worksheet to help you challenge the perceived benefits of any particular worry as a way of helping you interrupt the worry process and stop worrying so much. So with that introduction out of the way, let's start talking about the first worry belief. Have you ever thought about the relationship between worry and problem solving? Have you ever considered that worrying could actually help you become better at solving or avoiding problems? And when I pose this question to some of my clients who tend to worry a lot, it can resonate with them, and they can often recognize that they believe that the worrying actually helps them problem solve and actually helps them with the problem solving process. The, the idea behind this is that worrying can help people better solve problems, help them find better solutions to problems. It can increase vigilance or awareness of potential problems. It can increase preparedness in case problems come up. It can help a person develop a more well thought out reaction or solution to a problem, or it can even help people avoid problems or problematic situations entirely. Now, in the context of all of that, it raises the question, if worrying is helping me deal with problems in all of these ways, then why would I want to stop worrying? And the reality is, if worry did actually do all of these things, if worry did actually help you solve or avoid problems entirely, then you probably should worry, and you probably should worry even more than you actually do. And this could be a bit of a strange concept, as a lot of people see worry as a bad thing, but when they start to reflect on it, it can raise questions as to whether or not they actually hold positive beliefs about the usefulness of worry, and those beliefs are one of the reasons why they continue to worry so much. So you might be a little confused at this point, and you might be wondering if I'm suggesting that you should worry more as a way of becoming more effective at solving problems. No, not quite. The thing is, a lot of people who worry a lot will hold this belief that worry helps solve problems, but just because you believe something doesn't mean that it's true. Now, as you might expect, excessive worry doesn't actually help with problem solving. But just knowing that to be true often isn't enough to help people who worry a lot shut down their tendency to worry. So what I want you to do is to think about some questions that you can ask yourself to help challenge this belief and to help chip away at this notion that worry helps solve problems. And the first question to think about is, do you actually solve your problems by worrying? Or are you just going over the problem again and again and again in your head? You see, there's a difference between problem solving and worrying about a problem. You can think of worrying as a mental spinning of your wheels, whereas problem solving is a more step-by-step, structured series of thoughts that are directed towards solving a problem. So worrying is thinking about all of the what ifs and all of the worst case scenarios that can actually happen in relation to a particular problem. Whereas problem solving is more of a series of action steps. You're defining the problem, you're figuring out the goal, you're brainstorming solutions, you're evaluating the possible solutions, you're picking a solution, you're coming up with a plan for how to implement that solution, and then you're acting on that plan and following through on it. That's much different than spinning your wheels thinking about a bunch of what-if, worst-case scenarios. Another question to ask yourself to chip away at this belief that worry helps with problem solving is to ask yourself, do you know other people who are able to come up with good solutions to problems without worrying excessively? Are there people in your life who seem to be able to figure out problems and come up with solutions without fretting and worrying about these problems excessively? And if you can identify even just one person in your life who seems to be able to effectively solve problems without worrying excessively, then what that suggests is that worrying is not a necessary requirement for active problem solving. Another thing you can think about is, what is the impact that worrying is actually having on your ability to solve problems? Is it possible that the act of worrying actually interferes with the problem-solving process? Think about it. What are some of the cognitive tools and cognitive skills that you need to effectively solve problems? Well, these are things like being able to concentrate, being able to think creatively, being able to plan, being able to organize yourself, being able to motivate yourself to follow through on a plan. Now, think about what impact worrying excessively has on those cognitive functions. Does worrying excessively make it difficult to concentrate and focus on what you're doing? Does worrying excessively make it difficult to think creatively about possible solutions? Does worrying lead to procrastination to the point that you might put off following through with a decision that you've made or a solution that you've come up with? Does worrying about a problem make some of the problem seem so overwhelming that you don't even want to try to do anything about it and avoid doing anything about the problem entirely? When you step back and think about it, it's hard to justify how worrying excessively about problems can make you more effective at solving problems when the worrying in and of itself interferes with the cognitive functions that you need most in order to effectively solve problems. So if you ever catch yourself thinking that your worrying is helping you figure out and come up with solutions to problems, what you want to remember is that worrying is not the same as problem solving. Worrying is a mental spinning of your wheels, and problem solving is an active behavioral approach to dealing with the problem. And you also want to think, if other people can solve problems effectively without having to worry excessively about them first, then you should be able to solve problems without worrying about them excessively at first as well. And how can you be better at solving problems with worrying excessively when worrying interferes with the core cognitive skills that you need to effectively solve problems? Stress or pressure, these are external factors such as tight deadlines, challenging situations, or problems that need to be dealt with right away. Whereas worrying is a mental process. It's a cognitive process in which a person is repeatedly thinking about all of the potential negative outcomes or consequences that could happen in a situation. It's very common that people who worry a lot will worry about stressors or challenges in their lives. So it's common for people who worry a lot to think about worry and stress interchangeably because they often experience worry in the context of stress. And this can lead to a perception or a belief that the act of worrying serves as a motivating factor. In other words, worrying motivates me to get things done, particularly in stressful situations, but in non-stressful situations as well. People who tend to worry a lot commonly hold beliefs that if they worried less, they wouldn't get as many things done. They view worrying about something as a good way to motivate themselves to do something about it. By worrying about that project that I need to get done at work, the worry serves as the kick in the pants that I need to get going and actually work on the project. The concern is that if I worry less about the work project, I might become complacent and not do anything about it and put it off. And as a result, the work project won't get done, or it won't get done to the best of my abilities. So this is one of those positive beliefs that people will sometimes hold about worry. The perception that worry motivates me to get things done and do things that I might otherwise avoid, including responsibilities at work, household tasks, social activities, or recreational activities. It's the worry that drives me to get these things done, and if I don't worry, I won't do everything that I need to do. And if that were true, if it were true that worry actually motivated me, it would make a lot of sense to worry. If in fact it were true that worry helps motivate people to get things done, you probably should be worrying more than you actually do. And if you did worry more, that would mean you would be even more productive, more engaged, and even more successful. So you may be a little confused right now, wondering if I'm suggesting that people should worry more in order to feel more motivated and to accomplish more things. Not quite. Just like with the other worry beliefs that I've talked about, just because a person holds the belief that worry helps motivate them to get things done, that doesn't actually mean that it's true. And as you might guess, the reality is worry doesn't help motivate people to get things done. Excessive worry actually has the opposite function, and it leads to you feeling demotivated, sapped of energy, and makes it more difficult for you to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. But how do you prove that to yourself? How do you convince yourself that worrying doesn't help motivate you, especially if this is a belief that you've held for much of your life? Well, there are a few questions that you can ask yourself to help challenge and chip away at this belief and perception that worry helps motivate you. And the first question is, do you know anyone who is successful, anyone who is motivated, anyone who is able to accomplish things and get things done who doesn't worry excessively? And if you can identify even just one person in your life who is able to get things done, is able to motivate themselves, is able to accomplish things without worrying, then what that proves is that worry is not a necessary requirement for motivation. The second thing to ask yourself is, does your worry dramatically improve your performance? And if so, by what percentage? How much does worrying dramatically make you more motivated or make you more effective? These questions get you to think about how well you actually function and how well you actually perform when you're worrying excessively. And when people start to think about it, they start to recognize that worry doesn't actually improve their performance at all. If anything, worrying excessively can interfere with how well you're able to accomplish a task. And that leads to the third question that you want to ask yourself, which is, are there negative repercussions of your worry that actually interfere with your motivation and your ability to perform well? Think about the impact that worrying excessively has on you. Think about how you feel when you're worrying excessively. What does worry do to your concentration? What does worry do to your memory, to your energy levels? Well, for most people, worrying excessively actually interferes with concentration. It makes it more difficult to remember and recall things, and it tends to sap energy and to make a person feel worn out, tired, and exhausted. And so, if I'm having difficulty focusing, if I can't remember anything and I feel exhausted, that's not a recipe for great motivation and peak performance. Also, think about the anxiety that inevitably comes with excessive worry. How do high levels of anxiety affect your performance? Does high levels of anxiety actually make you less effective at what you're trying to do? And for the most part, the answer to these questions is typically yes. High levels of anxiety do interfere with performance and motivation. It's kind of like this inverse U shape where very low levels of stress or pressure or anxiety don't really improve performance at all. Whereas a moderate level of stress or anxiety, you get your sort of peak level of performance. But when the anxiety or stress gets too high, motivation and performance tends to decline. So if you ever catch yourself thinking that your worry is motivating you or allowing you to perform at your peak level, what you want to remember is the impact that excessive worry has on you. What it does to your energy levels, your drive, your concentration, your focus. You want to ask yourself, how much does the excessive worry actually improve your performance? And is it worth the costs that are associated with the excessive worry? And if you can think of even just one person in your life who is motivated and successful and can accomplish things who doesn't worry excessively, then you may want to question why it is that you need to worry excessively in order to perform well, whereas those people don't. And by thinking about the relationship between worry and motivation in this different way, it can help you interrupt the worry process because you're no longer thinking that worrying excessively is serving some positive benefit by being a source of motivation for you. And you can recognize that the excessive worry and the associated anxiety typically serves to demotivate you. And this belief relates to the idea that worrying can help prepare a person and protect them from future negative emotions if something bad were to happen in the future. So the idea behind this is that the act of worrying about something beforehand protects me from disappointment, guilt, being caught off guard, or surprised. So being worried in advance of some negative event protects me from negative emotions of disappointment, sadness, and guilt because the worrying is kind of like putting money in the bank for later. If the negative event that I'm worrying about takes place, what I've done is that I've already invested in my negative responses in advance, and therefore I'm going to be less affected by the negative event. So in other words, if I worry about losing my job, and then one day I actually lose my job, I won't be caught off guard. I won't be surprised, and the worrying will have allowed me to emotionally prepare myself for the disappointment and the sadness that will come when I lose my job. And in this way, worry protects me from future negative emotions. The worrying can protect me from being caught off guard, surprised, taken aback by some negative or unexpected event, or feelings of guilt about not having worried about a negative event in advance of it. So if worry actually does this, if worry actually can help protect me from future negative emotions, then it would be a pretty significant benefit of worrying. But is that actually the case? Does worrying actually do this? Does it actually protect you from future negative emotions? To help get the answer to this question, I want you to imagine this as a metaphorical math problem. I want you to think of negative feelings and negative events in our life in terms of pieces of suck. In other words, how much would it suck if this bad thing were to actually happen to me? I want you to imagine the following scenario. Suppose I'm terribly worried about my family dying in a serious motor vehicle accident. And this is something that I worry about a lot. It's constantly on my mind. It's constantly something that I'm thinking about and imagining. How do you think worrying about that potential outcome is going to make me feel? Well, it's kind of a terrible thing to imagine, a really horrible thing to think about. And so I'm probably not going to feel very great worrying and imagining my family being killed in a motor vehicle accident. So worrying about them getting into an accident is going to cost me some suck. It kind of sucks to think about it. It doesn't feel very good. So there's a certain amount of suck that's associated with that. Let's say 100 pieces of suck. Now imagine one day that I get a phone call and it's a nurse at the hospital calling to inform me that unfortunately my family was involved in a major motor vehicle accident and all of them died instantly in the accident. Now that would be a horrific thing to have happen. And when I get the news, do you think I'm going to say to myself, phew, I'm glad I've been worrying about this for so long. I don't feel so bad now that it's actually happened. No, it's going to feel awful. And I'm not going to feel any better about having worried about it for years in advance. It's still going to suck. So that's probably going to cost me 1,000 pieces of suck, regardless of whether or not I was worrying about it for years in advance or if I'd never considered it as a possibility. It's still going to be an awful outcome, and it's still going to cost me 1,000 pieces of suck. So let's do the math and understand the total cost of the various scenarios that can happen in this situation. So imagine I'm worrying about my family being involved in a motor vehicle accident for years in advance. That's going to cost me 100 pieces of suck. When I get that fateful phone call informing me that my family has been killed in a motor vehicle accident, that's going to cost me 1,000 pieces of suck. So the total cost of worrying about the negative thing happening and how I feel when the actual negative thing does happen is that I end up with 1,100 pieces of suck. Now imagine a scenario in which I haven't been worrying excessively about my family being killed in a motor vehicle accident for years in advance. That means I'm going to have 0 pieces of suck because I'm not worrying about it and I'm not experiencing the negative emotion associated with worrying about this awful scenario. Now imagine I get that phone call that my family has been killed, and that's going to cost me 1,000 pieces of suck. So in this scenario, not worrying about the negative outcome and the negative outcome actually happening ends up costing me 1,000 pieces of suck. So based on this math, worrying about the negative thing happening and the negative thing actually happening costs me more suck than not worrying about the negative thing happening and the negative thing actually happening. Now, imagine another scenario in which I worry about my family being involved in a fatal motor vehicle accident and they never end up being killed in a motor vehicle accident. So math there is that it costs me 100 pieces of suck to worry about them dying in an accident, but 0 pieces of suck because they never actually die in an accident. And what would the math be if I didn't worry about them dying in an accident and they never died in an accident? Well, in that scenario, not worrying about them dying in an accident costs me 0 pieces of suck. They never die in an accident. That's another 0 pieces of suck. I end up with 0 pieces of suck. So in this scenario, it still costs me more suck to worry about the bad thing happening than to not worry about the bad thing happening. So whenever I'm talking to my clients about this worry belief, that worry helps protect them from future negative emotions, what I always like to point out is, do the math. Is the worry actually helping protect you? Is it actually reducing the amount of suck that it's going to cost you when negative things happen in your life? Or is it just contributing to the amount of suck that you experience on a day-to-day basis, regardless of whether or not bad things actually do take place? And although this is a bit of a silly metaphor, I think it does highlight the fact that worrying serves no purpose in terms of protecting you from future negative emotions. And therefore, that isn't a benefit that you're actually getting from worry. So if you ever catch yourself thinking that your worry is helping protect you or prepare you in case bad things happen, remind yourself to do the math. And by thinking about the pieces of suck in relation to worrying, it can help you interrupt the worry process because you're no longer believing that the worry is actually protecting you or preparing you in some way. And this worry belief relates to the idea that worrying in and of itself can prevent negative outcomes. In other words, the act of worrying can have an effect on events, and that worry has the power over the occurrence or non-occurrence of positive or negative events. So one example of this is the notion that I've always worried about my child being involved in a serious car accident. It's never happened, and so my worrying must be working, and I have to keep it up. This worry belief has a bit of a magical thinking or superstitious flavor to it. In essence, the idea is our thoughts can have an influence over what happens in the universe and in the world around us. Now, often when I'm talking about this worry belief with some of my clients, they initially say that they would never believe something like that it doesn't make a lot of sense to them, and that they don't think that this relates to them. But then we get into discussions about ideas about some pretty common pop psychology topics. Things like, if you put good energy out into the universe, it will come back to you. If you think and really focus on your goals and what you want, the intention behind that will make it happen. One of the most popular examples of this is the book The Secret, which suggests that you can manifest your dreams by the way you think and that the energy you put out into the world. But even if you don't go so far as to believe that, most people have some superstitious beliefs. Things like wearing your lucky socks when you're going out on a first date, or things like announcers at sporting events not talking about a baseball pitcher who has a no-hitter going, or a hockey goaltender who has a shutout going, because they fear that if they mention it, it will jinx the no-hitter or the shutout. So these types of superstitious beliefs are pretty common for a lot of people, and so it's not a stretch to think that for people who worry a lot, they could perceive that their worry and the act of worry may influence what's going on around them. If I'm not worrying about that presentation that I'm going to be giving next week, it's almost like I'm getting too cocky or overly confident, and that the universe is going to give me a smack across the head because I'm not worrying enough. So you see, if you hold this belief that worry in and of itself can prevent bad things from happening just by the act of worrying, or if you believe that if you don't worry about something bad happening, then the bad thing is more likely to happen, then this presents a compelling argument and a compelling reason to continue worrying. And this can be one of the factors that maintains excessive worry. So if you notice that you recognize a bit of this superstitious belief about the usefulness of worry, what can you do about it? How can you challenge this worry belief? Now, one of the things that people often say when I talk about challenging this worry belief is that they just need to tell themselves that this worry belief is stupid or silly and that it's not true. Unfortunately, just trying to brush aside this worry belief as silly superstition typically isn't enough to fully challenge the worry belief. And in part, this is because for people who hold this worry belief, they've probably subconsciously told themselves thousands of times that worry is protecting them, that worry is preventing bad things from happening. And so they've heard that message over and over and over again. So just trying to dismiss it away doesn't necessarily feel true, even though you know logically that it is true. So better than just trying to dismiss it away, what you want to do is to collect some evidence to explain why this worry belief is not true. And so therefore, you're not just dismissing the worry belief with your feelings, but you're challenging the worry belief with data and evidence. So these are some of the questions you can ask yourself to help challenge this idea that worry in and of itself can prevent negative outcomes. Has anything bad ever happened even though you worried about it? If you can identify any times that you worried about a negative event occurring and that negative event actually occurred, this is evidence that worry doesn't prevent bad things from happening. I worried about going into that job interview and not getting the job, and that's what ended up happening. If worry could have prevented the bad thing from happening, then I should have gotten the job. Another question to ask is, are there other factors that are better predictors of your performance in a situation than whether you worried or not? So for example, how much time did you spend preparing for your job interview? How many job interviews have you had? How much experience have you had performing well in job interviews? How well did you match the qualifications of the person that they were looking for in the job that you were applying for? Think about what are some of the other factors independent of my worry that can account to explain whether or not something bad happened or something good happened. You may also want to ask yourself, how much time exactly do you need to worry about something to guarantee the positive outcome? If you worry about it for 5 minutes, is that enough to guarantee that the bad thing won't happen? Do you have to worry about it consistently in order to prevent the bad thing from happening? This question is getting at the logic and the mechanism behind this notion that worry prevents bad things from happening by requiring you to think about what exactly the worry is doing and how much of it you need to get the outcome that you want. And finally, one thing I really like to do with my clients to challenge this worry belief is to do a behavioral experiment. And this is the behavioral experiment I often run with my clients. I instruct my client to go out and buy a lottery ticket. And once they've bought the lottery ticket, I tell them to spend 20 minutes every day worrying as hard as they can, putting as much effort as they can into worrying that they've just wasted $2 buying this lottery ticket. Now, if worry prevented bad things from happening, what should happen in this scenario? Well, if worry prevented bad things from happening, what that means is that the client should win the lottery because their worry prevented them from having wasted $2 on this lottery ticket. And in all the years I've been getting clients to do this behavioral experiment, not one time has someone come back to me the next week and said, I won the lottery. And although it can seem like a pretty obvious outcome and a pretty silly example, actually getting a person to do a behavioral experiment like this really helps hammer home the idea that worry in and of itself cannot prevent bad things or negative outcomes from occurring. So one of the take-home messages of all of this is that it's important to recognize that your thoughts do not have an effect and do not impact the world around you independent of your behavior. It's not your thoughts that are preventing bad things from happening. It's how your thoughts get you to change your behavior. And it's the way your behavior interacts with the world that changes and influences the world. And although this may seem like an obvious concept, I think it does highlight the fact that we all tend to have superstitions, and that if our superstitions are contributing to things like excessive worry and anxiety, it's important to challenge the validity and the basis of those superstitions. then does worry and anxiety represent a positive personality characteristic? If worry is associated with being more responsible and demonstrating care for other people, then that's a good thing, right? And if that's the case, what that means is that you should probably continue worrying, if not worrying more than you're actually worrying at this time. The idea that worry represents a positive personality characteristic because it shows a sense of responsibility, conscientiousness, and caring, this is a common worry belief that can contribute to maintaining a person's tendency to worry excessively. And as long as a person believes that worry demonstrates conscientiousness, caring, responsibility, accountability, they're going to want to continue worrying because it's serving a useful purpose. A common example of this is the client who says to me, "I'm the worrier in my family. If I worry less, my parents would be disappointed in me. They would think that I just don't care about them anymore, that I'm not concerned about their well-being. By worrying, I show them that I care. I show them that I'm a good person." So in essence, this worry belief equates worrying with caring. And if the amount that you worried played a role in how much you cared about someone, your job or your performance or your relationship, then it makes sense to worry a lot because that demonstrates that you care a lot. You see this a lot in parents. What kind of parent would I be if I didn't worry about my children? Is it possible that parents who don't worry about their children care less and love their children less than parents who do worry a lot about their children? So if worrying equates to caring, then you should just keep worrying if you're a caring, conscientious person. But is this true? Now, you might get a sense that as I'm talking about this explicitly, that it's probably not true. But that leads to the question, why is this the case? How would you demonstrate to someone else, how would you convince yourself that worry is not a positive personality characteristic? That worry isn't an index or a representation of how much you love someone or how conscientious and responsible you are? To get at this, I encourage you to think about a few questions. If I hold the belief that worrying demonstrates that I'm a good parent, or that worrying shows that I'm a conscientious, responsible employee, what are some of the other factors that defines a good parent? What else defines a conscientious, responsible employee? Aside from worrying, is there anything else that you do that makes you a caring, conscientious person? And typically when a person starts to think about this, they can recognize that there are a lot of things that they do aside from worrying that demonstrates that they are a caring parent. I help my children with their homework. I encourage them to try new things. I comfort them when they're sad or disappointed. I spend quality time with them. I sacrifice for my children. These behaviors have nothing to do with worrying, but more my engagement and my time spent with my children. Another question to ask is, do you know any good mothers who don't worry excessively about their children? Do you know any caring and conscientious friends who aren't excessively worrying all the time? If you can identify any good mothers or friends who aren't excessive worriers, what that suggests is that worrying is not a necessary component of being a good mother or being a good friend. It's not a requirement. You might also want to ask yourself, does your worry ever make you less able to do some of the things that you want to be able to do? As a parent, as an employee, as a friend? How does your worry affect your ability to be present in an interaction and in a relationship? How does your worry affect your ability to be as productive as you can be at work? Oftentimes, when people start to think about the impact that the worry has had on their relationships or their job performance, they can begin to see that the worry can actually interfere with some of the things that they do to be a good employee or to be a good parent. The worry interferes with my ability to fully attend to my child telling me how their day went because I'm worrying about why they ate their lunch alone, which is something that they just said in passing and didn't seem to bother them too much, but it bothers me because I'm worrying about it and dwelling on it, and I haven't been present or heard the rest of what my child's telling me about their day. The worry may interfere with my ability to really enjoy quality time that I'm spending with my children as I'm distracted thinking about other things and thinking about other worries. So the worrying actually interferes with my ability to be present in situations and may limit my caring, my loving behaviors towards people because I'm so anxious and preoccupied with my worries. Another thing I'll often ask my clients to think about is to imagine their closest family members and their closest friends writing out a list of the top 10 characteristics and personality features of my client. These are the people who know my client the best and who have a good sense of what makes my client such a good and caring person. And then I ask the client, where do you think worries a lot is on that list of best personality characteristics? And often the client recognizes that their friends and family members would probably say that their tendency to worry a lot is actually not a good thing. It's a negative thing. It's not one of their best personality characteristics, but actually something that interferes with them being the best they can be. And so by asking yourself some of these questions, what you can begin to do is to start recognizing that there are other things independent of worry that demonstrate that you're a caring, conscientious, and responsible person. You can recognize that worry is not a necessary component of being a good and caring person because you know good and caring people who don't worry a lot. You can begin to recognize that the act of worrying interferes with you being the best version of yourself and being able to fully engage and fully connect with people that you're closest to. It interferes with your ability to perform to the best of your capabilities. You can begin to recognize that even though the worry tells you that worry makes you a caring, conscientious person, your friends and family and the people who are close to you, they probably see your tendency to worry as a negative thing. And by challenging this worry belief, by really examining this notion that worry is a positive personality trait or a characteristic, what you'll probably find that in a lot of ways, the worrying is actually holding you back from being as caring, conscientious, and responsible as you could potentially be. It's also important to note that worry is not a personality characteristic. There's no such thing as a worrying personality. Worry is a thought process. It's something that people learn to do and gets reinforced by negative beliefs and worry-promoting behaviors. But it's not something that a person is. It's not their personality any more than playing piano is a personality characteristic. When people can recognize that their worry doesn't serve any useful purpose or benefit, it can still be difficult to disconnect from the worry, especially if worrying is something that has just become part of your day-to-day life, as is often seen in generalized anxiety disorder. So even if you hold beliefs that worry might be serving some benefit, it's important to think about and question at what cost. Even if my tendency to worry gave me some benefit, and it probably doesn't, but even if it did, how much is that benefit worth compared to the impact the worry is having on me? So with that in mind, let's talk about some of the personal costs of excessive worry. So first of all, it can affect productivity and performance at work or in school. A person who's constantly worrying about their work may have difficulty focusing and completing tasks. This can lead to missed deadlines, reduced output, and negative feedback from supervisors. A student who is worrying about exams may have difficulty studying and retaining information, which can then lead to lower grades and academic problems. Excessive worry can impact a person's decision-making because worry can cloud judgment and make it difficult to weigh through the pros and cons of a decision carefully. This may not be such a big deal for small decisions like what I'm going to have for dinner, but it can impact major life decisions like buying a house, changing jobs, or ending a relationship. It can also affect a person's health, as someone who's worried about a medical diagnosis may make impulsive decisions about treatment without fully understanding the risks or the benefits. Excessive worry can lead to relationship problems, as constant worrying can lead to a person becoming more irritable and withdrawn around their loved ones. This can lead to conflict and tension in close relationships, which can then serve as an additional thing to worry about. Another example is that a person who's worried about their partner's fidelity might become suspicious or accusatory, and that can damage the relationship and lead to mistrust and resentment on the part of the partner. Another personal cost of excessive worry is that it can lead to physical health problems. Excessive worry can contribute to a number of physical conditions, including headaches, muscle tension, stomach aches, and sleep problems. In fact, generalized anxiety disorder is one of the most expensive mental health conditions on the healthcare system because people often show up in their doctor's offices complaining of these vague physical complaints with no underlying cause. And so the doctor does all of these diagnostic tests and can't find any underlying physical problem that's leading to the symptoms. And this can just generate increased worry and frustration for the person with generalized anxiety disorder. Now, in addition to these personal costs, there are financial costs associated with excessive worry. Chronic worry can interfere with your ability to work effectively, and this can lead to lost income. For example, you may need to take time off work to manage symptoms of anxiety or excessive worry, and this can result in increased absenteeism from work. Additionally, the worry may interfere with your ability to perform your job duties to your full potential because you're so fatigued and worn out by the worry and are having difficulty concentrating because you just can't stop worrying. So even though you're at work, you're not getting as much done, and this is something we call presenteeism. So being at work and being physically there, but not being fully engaged and not being fully at your best capabilities. Another problem is that excessive worry can make it difficult to enjoy life and appreciate the present moment. When you're constantly worrying about the future or dwelling on the past, it's difficult to be fully present and engaged in a moment. This can lead to feelings of emptiness and reduced quality of life. Worry can make it difficult to relax and unwind, constantly causing you to feel on edge or on the verge of burnout. Another cost of excessive worry is that it contributes to a sense of helplessness and despair. Worry can make it feel like there's nothing you can do to change your situation, which can make it difficult to motivate yourself to take action or to see any hope for the future. This can lead to a downward spiral of negative thoughts and emotions, contributing to depressed mood. So, as you can see, there are a lot of ways in which excessive worry comes at a great cost. And so, even if you think that the worry is serving some positive purpose, it's also important to think about all of the ways in which worry might be negatively impacting your life. So, one way to use this information to interrupt the worry cycle is that when you notice yourself worrying excessively about something, you want to think about the costs associated with that worry and ask yourself if it's worthwhile to continue worrying. And some of the questions you may want to ask yourself to help get at this include things like, has excessive worrying about this particular topic impacted my relationships with other people, with my friends, with my family? Has excessive worry impacted on my work performance? Does it take me more time to complete tasks and get things done? What impact is the excessive worry having on my stress level and my fatigue? How much time and effort do I spend worrying? And does that take away from other things I would want to be doing? And are there other people that seem to get the same good results without worrying about this topic so much? Am I getting better results by worrying than people who don't seem to worry as much? So by asking yourself some of these questions, what you can do is put a magnifying glass on your worry and really gets you to think about the actual impact that the worry is having on your life. So you've gone through to this part of the video, and what you've learned so far are the 5 common worry beliefs and the various ways of challenging each of the worry beliefs. You've also heard about some of the costs that excessive worry can have on a person's life and well-being. So what can you do with all of this information, and how do you use this to help you stop worrying so much? Well, to help with this, I get my clients to complete an Evaluating the Usefulness of Worry worksheet. And I'll put a link to the worksheet in the video description below so you can download it and use it as much as you want. So the first step is to identify what it is that you're worrying about. This is where worry awareness becomes really important, recognizing when you're worrying and what you're worrying about. So once you've identified the worry and written it down, the next thing you want to ask yourself is, what is your proof, or what are your arguments that support the usefulness of the worry? Essentially, what this question is getting at is, what are the worry beliefs that are playing a role, or that are being activated in this worry? Which of the 5 worry beliefs are playing a role here? And once you've identified those worry beliefs, the next question to ask yourself is, if you had to show that this worry is not useful, what would be your proof or arguments against the usefulness of this worry? So this is where you use those questions and methods for challenging each of the worry beliefs. And once I've done this, the next question I want to ask myself is, what are the advantages or the benefits of continuing to worry about this topic? And just a hint, it's fairly common that the answer to this question is that there is no advantage and there is no benefit of continuing to worry about this. So then I want to ask myself, what are the disadvantages or the costs of continuing to worry about this topic? And that's where I think about all of their various costs and impacts that I've talked about that worry can have on a person's life. So I think about the negative impact that the worry is having on me. And so once I've answered all of those questions, what I want to ask myself is, what conclusions do I draw at this point about the usefulness of worry in relation to this particular topic? What implications do these conclusions have for whether or not I should be worrying about this topic? Well, what you end up with is a much more compelling and detailed challenge of the potential benefits of this worry, rather than just telling yourself that this worry is stupid and you shouldn't be thinking about it. You end up with a lot more detail and a lot more reason for why you shouldn't be worrying about it. And that comprehensive and thought out process is a much more compelling challenge that can help break away from the worry. And if you're interested in learning more about other techniques and approaches to manage excessive worry, I'd encourage you to check out this video. So that's all for today's video. As always, thank you for watching all the way to the end of this video, and I'll see you in the next one.